most serious manifestation of defamation of religion is again on the increase in shape of Islamophobia.
It needs to integrate new forms of racism such as Islamophobia.
And new dangerous developments have occurred since the terrorist attacks of September 11. Incitement to racial hatred and religious hatred with its amplified and particular consequences on African and Muslim communities and minorities. Despite the DTPA's call to eliminate Islamophobia, this phenomena has been on the rise in recent years.
National and international response to deal with the challenge of defamation of religions, particularly Islam, has remained insufficient. This new and insidious form of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance should be addressed by the Durban Review Conference.
The negative stereotyping of religions and defamation of religious personalities, holy books, scriptures, and symbols, as well as the passing of anti-terrorist legislation, continue to be a matter of our concern.
To address the continued plight and suffering of the Palestinian people and non-recognition of their inalienable right to self-determination.
Let us not forget that the DTPA also expressed its concern regarding the plight of the Palestinian people under foreign occupation.
The Palestinian people continue to be denied their fundamental right of self-determination. Policies against the enjoyment of their basic human rights are being exacerbated by the occupying power Israel. And in this new Durban Review Conference, we must take a step and look into the situation in that region and take measures to implement the provisions of the DDPA.
The plight of the Palestinian people, OP 32 of the Abuja document.
I now give the floor to the next speaker, the representative of UN Watch.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As we meet this year to address racism and the follow-up Durban Conference, we mark the 40th anniversary of the assassination of Martin Luther King. In the struggle for black equality, the founder of UN Watch, the late Morris Abram, marched arm in arm with Reverend King, as we continue to do with the anti-racism cause worldwide. The question facing us today is this: how can we use the limited tools of the UN human rights system to protect victims of racism? After all, this body has no power to put boots on the ground. One is reminded of the attitude expressed by Josef Stalin. When told that persecution of Catholics would antagonize the Pope, he replied, "The Pope? And how many divisions has he got?" But history teaches us that a moral voice can move mountains. We learned this from Mahatma Gandhi, whose birthday we celebrated last week with the Second International Day of Nonviolence. We learned this from Reverend King, from Nelson Mandela, and from Pope John Paul II, whose moral voice, it turned out, helped defeat the evils of Soviet totalitarianism. It is true, we have no boots, no weapons, no divisions, but we do have the power to use our moral voice to send a message to the perpetrators of racism that the world bears witness to their crimes. 7 years after the Durban Declaration, we must ask, during this time, did we confront the crimes of racism and xenophobia? Did we use our moral voice? As the Islamic group rightly noted, in this period, Muslims, among others, were victims. For example, Chechens were subjected to crimes against humanity. In 2004, a resolution for Chechen victims was introduced at the Commission on Human Rights. Tragically, an alliance of powerful blocs voted to defeat it. During this same period, black Muslims in Darfur were subjected to mass murder and mass rape, crimes that the ICC prosecutor categorized as genocide. In 2005, a resolution was introduced in the General Assembly for the victims of Darfur. Once again, however, the same powerful blocs defeated it. Ironically, the Islamic group failed to support either of these resolutions. Finally, this past March, while the Human Rights Council was in session, the world witnessed unprecedented xenophobic violence and repression in Tibet. When some states and NGOs tried to speak in the Council for the protection of this minority, they were immediately stifled by the same powerful blocs. all of this is cause for alarm, because the most vocal advocates for the upcoming Durban Conference are in fact those very same blocs, those that act systematically against the victims of racism and against the moral principles of Martin Luther King. On what basis, therefore, should we, in the anti-racism cause, expect anything other than empty rhetoric which will achieve absolutely nothing for the world's victims of racism? Thank you, Madam Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of UN Watch. I now give the